Hi, hey, welcome to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Um, I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and I'm looking for my notes. Okay, I found them. So the question of today is how do we heal from the brokenness that life so often brings our way? This question is so important, and we are very lucky to have a guest today with powerful insights on this question. So, without further ado, let's start Awkwardly Awesome Podcast episode 36, starting right now.
Today's guest, Helen Rose.
Hey, I'm so honored to have Helen Rose today. Let me tell you a little about this amazing person. Helen Rose is a speaker, author, and coach known for her ability to move, educate, and relate to crowds with her motivation and humor. It soon becomes evident she is passionate, talks with her hands, which makes me want to talk with my hands, and has enormous energy. She believes in the endurance of the human spirit and this is my favorite part, uses ample yet perfectly inappropriately placed F-bombs. Her journey has given her the voice to share her story with others who may have traveled along similar paths. Basically, Helen journeyed through an extremely challenging childhood. Um, but before I say more about that, we have Helen herself in the studio. So please help me welcome Helen Rose.
Wow, what a greeting. Thanks, Jason. That was awesome.
Um, hey Helen,
Hey, Jay.
thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited.
We were discussing that the realities when we look out our windows are slightly different. Like I live in South Dakota and I look out my window and I see deer or I see turkeys. What do you see when you look out your window?
Well, when I look out my window, depending on the time of day and at the whim of all the wildlife here, I see black bears, I see cinnamon bears, I see coyotes, I have seen a bobcat, and I love it. I don't see humans, which is lovely. It's nice just to be away, tucked away in my little property here. I love it. So yeah, it's pretty nice.
And you're in the Rocky Mountains of Canada, right?
Yeah. I live just outside of Calgary and in between Calgary and Banff. And it's just absolutely heaven here. But we were saying that earlier before we started this podcast. It's so nice to have the technology we have now because we wouldn't have met otherwise, Jay. Love it.
It's
Yeah.
It's amazing to think how we met in the virtual world, and now we're still in the virtual world, but we're having a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was your life always like? Did you always know the contentment and peace that you know now?
No, I didn't. Not for a very long time. I didn't even know that I could ever have contentment and peace. But I do now, indeed, with a lot of work. But I have it now, and I'm very, very happy in my life.
How would you I mean, I want you to talk a little about this because it's easy from the outside to look at people who are happy and successful and think, oh, they had the luck of the draw, or they just are so talented. But how would you describe your childhood?
So if I had to, a disaster would have been a good word.
Disaster.
A disaster, yeah. And you
Mm.
know, and I want to preface the whole thing by saying that there are certainly far worse stories than mine, and that's where that gratitude piece comes in. But I was a child of the foster care system, shuttled between 8 foster homes between the age of birth and 2.5 years, and then I was placed into a home that would subsequently adopt me at 4.5. And I think I just was such a brutal time for that little girl. And
Mm.
yeah, so I actually really struggled with any kind of identity, struggled with bonding with people. I still do a little bit, and it's funny, I'm one of those people that kind of knows everyone, but I'm actually extraordinarily private. I have my little bubble of who I want in my world, which is how I want it. But it took me a long time, I'm guessing. I'm going to tell you, it was probably, it's hard to say now, 2020 is always 2020 vision, right? But one of the things was kind of as I was moving along in my life, I was, out of that childhood came a very independent and strong-willed woman. So I would have no problems just kind of picking up and changing my life and moving. So I did that. And of course, at every stage that I went along, I thought I had it under control. Didn't understand a lot of how I really struggled with personal relationships. And then I wrote a book. I mean, you're getting the Cole's version today, but I had my son when I was 25, and it was really then that I started to kind of perk up and go, okay, yeah, you got to get your you know what in a pile. So and then I wrote a book when I was 38, 39 about my story, and that really did a number on me. So I put it away, and then I got married, and everything was going along, but it wasn't really. And so then when my husband and I split up in 2011, it really was then that I thought, okay, you got to get something here. You got to make sense, or at least find some good out of the story that is yours. So that's where it's brought me today. And it's interesting that you said that earlier, because I had someone ask me if I would write her story for her, because she said it perfectly. She said, now you're seeing the polished version of me, right?
Mm.
To your point earlier, it's like there was no luck of the draw here. It was hard work to be who I am and how I'm standing here today, for sure. But you're right. We all get to see kind of the polished version of our journey. And I think, if I didn't have kind of a calling to want to help other people with similar journeys, or help people deal with their grief journey and all of that, no one would probably have known the childhood I had, because I've done so much work and chose to be who I am.
So you said something that really surprised me about your first book. You said you wrote it at 38, and it did a number on you. Why? How did it come to do a number on you? We think writing is so cathartic and.
And it is cathartic, but you have to go through the kind of the mud first in order to reach that point where you've come to terms with what's happened. So what I did was I initially, to remember, I had to go back to my journey, and there was a lot of stuff that I didn't really know, and I, researched it through the Children's Aid Society, and just to stand outside of the story and look at that poor little girl who really had nowhere to go, and then realizing I mean, we can all look back and say, oh man, I wish that hadn't happened. Oh, I wish that, So
Mhm.
I had to be very careful when I was writing it, because I wanted to write it from the perspective of a young girl, because by that time I had built up my little toolbox of anger and not understanding and kind of being the victim, kind of thing, making poor choices and blaming everyone else, right? And
Mm.
it's not about that, of course. So what the number it did on me was, how the heck did I end up even where I was at 35, um, knowing what I knew then? You know what I mean? Like when I went back, it was like, oh my gosh, how the heck did I survive that? And so that's what it did. The number on me was, and I didn't want to hurt my family, that my adopted family, they're good people. It just wasn't a good
Mm.
match. And I didn't want
Mm.
to I think I was worried that I was going to get called on it and be told that it wasn't a true story. And
Mm.
because it was just so outrageous. But when I say it did a number on my head, I really did have to come to terms about, oh my gosh, look at that. Look what I just journaled. So that's what the number it did on me, and still does sometimes. You know, I don't really.
This is such an important point that we can live through something like you lived through, but not really, not really comprehend the totality of it because we're busy moving forward.
Yeah, and that's true, and also you're busy standing in it, right? You don't realize. I mean, I heard a great term when it was like, you're a fish in water. You don't know any different. You just swim, right? So, and that's very true. And so I struggled a lot with what was normal. Not only did I grow up in an alcoholic home, which is never normal, but also just to realize that I was essentially abandoned several times when I was younger. And so I couldn't make sense of anything. I didn't even know what was normal. Unfortunately, you take all that stuff in and you blame yourself for it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you, and this is a complex question, I suppose, but how do you move from blaming that little girl who was trying to survive this chaotic environment to having compassion and love for her?
That's a really good question. And I think you have to do it through a lot of work and realizing, if you can bring the compassion in for the people that were the players, the adults.
Mhm.
So I actually had someone ask me one time, do you blame the Ontario foster care system? And I'm like, no, I don't. I mean, we have social workers that are trying to place a troubled child. We have, I mean, in a perfect world, the best place is for the parent is to have the child. The best place for the child is to be with the parent. And when that didn't match, they were just desperate to find a home for this little girl. And so when you can step outside of that um, ego part of it and look at it as it is, it's a lot easier to accept that, you can't blame yourself. You had no control. I was two, for Pete's sake, right? I
Mhm.
look at my 3-year-old granddaughter, who is brilliant beyond and has so much love.
Mhm.
I mean, my son and my daughter-in-law are
Mhm.
terrific parents and
Mhm.
terrific people, and they're giving her everything, right? And so that's when, if you want to step into yourself and go, oh my gosh, I didn't have that. And there's quite often I feel really sad because I'm like, I didn't
Mhm.
get any of that. But so when you come through the forgiveness is realizing that it's just a story. I can change it. If you want to live in that survival mode all the time, then do that. But you're going to know that there is a consequence to that. You're not going to have a true happiness, right? You're not going to be able to, know your own boundaries and that kind of stuff. So when you're at the mercy of people, when you're little, you have to forgive everybody because everybody's doing, really, I used to hate it when people used to go, oh, you're doing the best you can at the time. I used to hate hearing that because it was almost like a letting them off the hook. But one thing I did learn was, condoning behavior and forgiving behavior are two very different things.
Can you say more about that, because it sounds like a hugely important distinction?
It is. And so one of the things that, so I, really the one that, I mean, when I look back, my mom, my adopted mother, she really just wanted to have a family. And I didn't really know her history until I was researching this book, and I was asking her, and all of a sudden I was hearing she had a horrific childhood. She lost her father when she was 7 in 1926. Then the house burned down, and then they were living in a chicken coop, and then the aunts, women didn't raise 4 children by themselves in 1926 or whatever, so they got farmed out to relatives. So when she started to tell me that story, it really was at that point that I thought, oh my gosh, we all have a story to tell. And who am I to judge? Did I like what she did as a mom? Not really. She was not a very nice person to me. But then when I was going through my recovery of the grief of not having what everyone thinks they're entitled to, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Not everyone gets that. But then what you can do, and you fall into that trap, is vilifying someone. And I was really unfair to my mother. And it wasn't about, punishing myself over that, but I just simply didn't understand as a child that this woman just really wanted a family, and she was dealing with an alcoholic husband. She had 4 children kind of dumped on her doorstep at once in her mid-40s. Why in hell she was doing that, I'm not sure. But
in her mid-40s?
In her mid-40s. I said to her, what were you thinking? And she was like, well, there was nowhere else for these kids to go. So I know. And so when I started to understand, it's funny, that mature thing, as you go along, you start to realize that everybody has their own journey and everyone has their expectations. And when, it's just not a simple line of she was a horrible mother. In a lot of respects, she wasn't a horrible mother. She gave me my work ethic. I was never hungry. I was never cold. If I wanted to go horseback riding, I did. If I wanted to go skating, if I wanted to go skiing, they were great people that way. And I think that really, in a lot of ways, she was let down by the system because they were just trying to place this child. And she had a vision in her mind of what her little girl was going to be like. And it was nothing as she had envisioned, not even looks wise. Like, she always used to tell me she wanted a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. Well, now I'm gray, but I was quite dark when I was young. And so she just didn't even get the expectations of having this sweet little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, right? And so, but to be fair to her, she also was not given the tools in 1965 to deal with a damaged little girl. She just wasn't, Jason. They didn't do those things then. It was really, just get in that home and be grateful someone wants you. And so I think her frustrations dealing with a child that didn't want to be hugged or whatever, dealing with the frustrations of having an alcoholic husband, dealing with the frustration of not having her expectations met. Like, there's lots of layers to the story. So when you're talking about that forgiveness piece, you could talk to my son. I'm pretty sure there's things that I did that he did not like. And maybe that will come back, and he'll come back and talk to me about it one day, for sure. But you just don't have the right to judge someone else's journey as much as it really hurt.
If anyone else has a question for Helen, please chime in. I have plenty, but if you have one, I would love to ask her. So please comment. It must have been like there's been so many milestones in your journey, getting to the point where you could sit down and talk to her mom and talk to your mom and give her space to actually tell her story. That must have been that must have been quite a thing for you, because you probably couldn't have done that in your teenage years.
No, I probably wouldn't have understood it. And I felt a great deal of sadness for her when she lost her real love of her life in the wartime. He went off to war and didn't come back. She had a lot of grief in her life that just was never talked about. I mean, I don't know, did they ever talk about those kinds of things, right? So yeah, it was very special for me to spend that time with her. Now, I was always kind of hopeful that we were going to have this really cool mother-daughter bond, but it didn't happen. But at the end of her life, when she had a sundowning dementia, I went home and was going through the stuff with her, and she said to me, "Do you have family?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Well, it's been lovely to, spend the day with you, but I'm going to wait for my daughter to get here." So she didn't even know I was her daughter. And that made me actually really sad. And I had always had this image of this woman who was like really scary. I was terrified of my mother. She was scary. And so she probably wasn't, but we all have a little fear of our parents, I think. But when she was in long-term care, the last time I saw her, and I knew it was going to be the last time that I saw her, we walked through the dining room together, and here she was, this 94-year-old woman, like a little girl, Jason, little girl, waving out the window, waving at me. And I stood out in the parking lot, and I couldn't even find I found some compassion for her on a level, because she was a human being, and that was not my mother. It was that sweet little woman waving out the window. Felt terrible leaving her. And it was really, I think, to your question earlier, is you sometimes just have to come to terms with that you're not going to get the answers that you think you want or deserve. It's not about that. Does that make sense?
So you both were able to communicate later in your lives, but it wasn't like you suddenly had this perfect magical mother-daughter relationship.
No, it never happened, and it never did happen. And I just, I think it, in the healing that I've done since she's passed away, I would love to be, I kind of always envision in my head, I'm doing the same thing. I had an expectation that she would see, how well I was as a parent, how successful I was in my career and in my life. And, I didn't go the alcoholic route. I didn't, get into drugs, none of that kind of stuff. I had a pretty good life despite what happened. And I always kind of envisioned that she would kind of tell me how important I was in her life. And she just never had those words. And I don't, people will say to me, "Oh my gosh, your mom talks so highly of you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, too bad she doesn't do it." You know what I mean? So you can get in that, when that bitter beast kind of crawls in, you have to be very mindful to stop that. Because that's when you get into the judgment mode. I had no right to judge her. I didn't like some of the stuff she did, but I didn't understand it either. So, and it's not about letting her off the hook. She can't change it anyway. I remember when she read the book, she was angry. And she wasn't angry or mortified that she was that kind of mother. She was like, "Oh my God, people are going to know it's me." And I'm thinking, that's it? And so we kind of had this huge blowout. And at one point she just started crying, and she said, how can I change it? And that really was the moment where I went, you can't. Nobody can change it. And so I had to let her off the hook a bit.
So you just said nobody can change it, and that's true. No one can change how she interacted with you. But and this gives me goosebumps. At age 25, you started you started changing something for future generations, and now for your grandchild. What was it like to become a mom? Did you have to consciously think, I'm not going to be a mom like I experienced? Or what was that?
So it's stated in the book. I wasn't sure I could be a good mom. I mean, I had no idea how I was going to look after this little person. And he really got me on the path of what a good purpose was. It wasn't just kind of floating through. And it really was the pivotal point in my life where it was like, okay, you are now wholly responsible for another human being. And I would love to tell you that I didn't carry some of my childhood learned behaviors into my parenting role. But to your point, I did stop it because I did not want my son to feel like I felt.
How did you stop it? I mean, unfortunately, millions of parents are not able to stop it and just
Yeah.
continue on the trauma. How were you able to say I'm going to raise my son in a different way?
So I was lucky enough his father is a really nice guy. And
Oh,
yeah, he is. He's a really nice guy, and he's married to a wonderful woman. So I sent Alex to live with them because I thought at the time that I was such a horrible, he was a 10-year-old boy. 10-year-old boys are a pain in the butt. But but I blamed it all on myself, right? It was that big ego that I always had. Like everything he did was because I was a terrible mother, and it was
Mm.
exhausting. And so I phoned his dad and I said, "Can you take him?" And I felt terrible doing it, but I also knew that I needed a break. I mean, I raised this child by myself for 10 years, almost 11 years by the time he went. And I felt like I had abandoned him, but I needed to stop because I was starting to have huge anxieties about how he was going to be for his future. He was actually a wonderful little boy, but he was definitely, I always call him spirited, but he needed to be away from me. And I thought it was because I was a horrible mother, when in fact was he needed to be away from me so I could heal. And that's when I started writing the book. And that catharsis started, where it was like, I can't keep this intergenerational trauma to go. I just couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it to another human being. I would never have wanted my child to feel like I felt. And so it stopped. And so the time that he was gone, I did a lot of work on figuring out really how I felt. And of course, writing the book brought a whole bunch of stuff to light, and just how innocent I really was and how naive I really was about parenting. But boy, that's a great way to figure out when you want to start judging how other people parent. You become a parent, you quickly learn that nobody is perfect as a parent, right? And I took a lot of that good stuff from my mom and my father. Like my son has a tremendous work ethic. But I
Mm.
stopped it. And I'll tell you, I know it worked, Jason, because I look at how good he is as a parent. Like this little boy is grown into this beautiful man who is an incredible family man. And it's really important for him. I know. And it just makes me so proud.
It must be so exhilarating to see your granddaughter.
Oh, I have two perfect grandchildren, both girls. And they're 3 and 1. I know I sound like a grandmother. I'm not apologizing, but
That's good. Don't
no,
apologize.
I see my little one, the 3-year-old especially, very much. She's very much like her dad. She is very dynamic. She's willful. She knows her own mind. Super smart. Just this tremendous human being already, and just so clever. And the little one is the same. And so what I like is that they have not grown up yet feeling unloved. They are so loved. It's wonderful. And so I know that I did the right thing when I sent him away so I could heal. Now, not all parents are lucky enough to have a good relationship with the other parent. And that was also something to note, is that his father and I didn't have a relationship. But I didn't care what happened between us. It was so important for me that Alex knew his father.
So during this pause when Alex was 10, what else did you do to heal besides write the book?
You know what? I read a lot of stories that were like similar to mine.
Have you ever done that before in your life journey?
No.
So you kind of, before you started reading these stories, you kind of felt like the only one?
Yeah, I mean, quite often hear people that grow up in traumatic situations, or in traumatic. It doesn't have to be growing up in it, but you really don't know that there's lots of other people. You know, I mean, there's lots of people that live with traumatic experiences. But if you really do, when you're going through it, you think you're the only one. No one else understands you, right? And while that might be true to a certain degree, there's a lot of sameness in all of it. You know, I've read so many books about parents of alcoholics or children of alcoholics, and just how helpless my mother was dealing with my father, who was this sweetest man, but he was always just drunk, and he got worse as he got older. And I mean, how is that, looking after 4 kids in a household, and you got a husband that can't keep a job because he's always drunk, and like, that poor woman, right?
Sounds immensely stressful.
It is. And quite often, you know, I mean, I used to always blame my mother for the situation. Not, right? But so I did a lot of that, just really reflecting, I was alone for, I don't know, 2 years. He ended up staying for 2 years. He was only supposed to be gone for 1, but and I was worried that I was going to lose my son and that he would feel that I had abandoned him. And in fact, we became even closer. Like, we're very close.
So what was the impact on you of realizing suddenly that you were not the only one who experienced a really challenging childhood?
It gives you a measure of freedom to know that it's not you. You're
Mm.
kind of at, you know, the mercy of other human beings. It's freeing to know that other people feel that abandonment. It's freeing to know that you can have this polished look despite. You know, everybody has a journey. Not everyone is so open about it, right? I mean, maybe more so now, I don't know. But there's lots of things that have happened to people they never discuss, right? And that was them. Me, I happen to be very, you know, kind of hard on my sleeve. I kind of tell it the way it is. And, you know, it's not a right or wrong thing. It was just how I was as a person.
So good, more goosebumps. Now you're sharing the story with other people who've gone through similar experiences, so they don't have to feel so alone. So not only did you give your son a different path forward than you have, but now you're giving people you don't even know, maybe even someone on listening right now, a different path forward.
Yeah, and that's my hope, is that if you've had a trauma, or there's been an experience that just doesn't sit well and you can't make sense of it. I mean, we try and make sense of these things as people.
And us brains can spin around and around trying to make sense of it.
Totally. And, you know, the thing that we do is really the only person we can control, and we're told this time and time again, is the only person we can truly control is ourselves and how we respond in all of those. But when you have been kind of put into that victim role, and it's important to know that a 2-year-old that had to go through all that probably could fall under that definition of victim. But when you're 25 and, up and you realize that you are responsible for your choices, no one else is responsible for your poor choices. You are. That is in itself freeing, to know that you can just give it over to the universe or God or whoever that is for you, and know that you can have exactly what you want.
So at 25, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I mean, and you say having a kid changed you, but like, how do you choose this path at 25? It's still very young. Today you could just be going around telling everyone how you would have had a good life if only your childhood hadn't been bad, and you could have just you could be addicted to stuff. And like, how did you switch
Well,
directions? I mean, that takes so much courage.
yeah, thank you. It's such a good question, and I think it was almost. I just knew that I didn't want to feel like crap for the rest of my life.
You
And
knew that you didn't want to feel like crap for the.
yeah, I didn't want to be constantly. Um, I spent a great deal of my life very sad and not knowing why.
Mm.
I think that that when Alex came into my life, I think it was then I realized that I just was responsible for another human being. I mean, and when I met my birth parents, and it didn't happen at 25, Jason. It happened between 25 and I'm still working on it at 59, right?
Oh, this is a crucial point. It didn't happen at 25. It happened at 25, and you're still working on it
Always.
some years later.
Always. And it's not a constant everyday 24 hours thing, but it's like, for example, if I spend a day with my granddaughter and she's off and she's got so much love and I love that, that's when I go back and I remember, oh my gosh, and it's not about feeling sorry, but it's just that awareness, I think, that comes about. It's awareness, but also in that awareness is that gratitude that, yes, for some reason, I must have big angels or something. I really did meet all the right people I needed to meet as I went along in my journey. And my son is one of them. He was brought to me for that reason. I believe that so much.
Was there a person you met before your son who was really an angel, like in your teenage years?
Yes, I had a family when I was 12. I think it was the summer I was 12. So I remember when I was 10, I wanted a pair of jeans and they were like $52. And we're talking like a million years ago. And my mom's like, well, I'm not paying $52 for a pair of jeans. So I thought, fine. So I got on my bike and I went down to one of the resorts and I got a job babysitting for the summer. And I think I made $68. And I remember coming home in the car and I had 68 whole dollars after a summer of working. And I didn't buy those jeans because all of a sudden I had the value of $68, right? So when I was 12, I went to work at a resort, and these people that I met, without being disrespectful to my adopted family, because they're all really good people. I have a few cousins I'm very, very close to. I love that family, but I don't necessarily feel like I belong there. This family I met, they had it was my sister friend, who's I'm very close to now, and her husband and her 3 boys, but her parents owned the resort, and her father, really, I call him Dad T. He's passed away now. He's the man that I don't know how my life would have gone, honestly, Jason, after age 12 if I had not met this man, because he saved my life. He came and got me, and I lived with them for a while, and I was back and forth, and I stayed very close with this family. They are my family, and I have said forever and ever, I would not have been the person I am today had I not met Dad T. He was a wonderful man. Yeah.
Did he ever comprehend how much what he did helped you change your life? Or was he just doing was he simply doing what he knew needed to be done?
Well, that's a really good question, and I don't know how to answer it. I think that he saw just a really damaged little girl. And, he was never judged my parents, not once. Certainly not in front of me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I do know that when he came to pick me up that day, he did call my mom and say, she's with me. So he knew enough to say, listen, she's with me. She's safe. Right.
But he didn't berate your parents or anything. He just said,
Never.
she's safe. She's fine.
Yeah. He never, ever, he was a very, very much, never judged anybody. He just respected everyone's journey. He was a wonderful man. I adored him. Yeah. Yeah. So to that answer, I would say that family is the one that saved my life emotionally anyway. And then then my son was born, and I just really, from a very young age, learned to kind of rely on myself, which was a blessing and a curse.
So how, speaking of relying on yourself, and I don't know if this is a proper segue, but it's the question I want to ask next. So we'll make it work. But speaking of relying on yourself, what does intentional freedom have to do with your journey?
So intentional freedom is my 5-week course. And, it's funny, when I put it together, it seems so simple, but I watch my clients struggle with, we all share the same 24 hours. So how are you taking care of yourself on top of how are you spending your time with work? Are you happy at work? If you're not happy, then change it. That's the thing, that if you're not happy, then change it. And that goes for your job, that goes for your personal relationships, that goes with friendships, all of those things. And so intentional freedom really gets people dealing with how they spend their time. Because a lot of people can hide behind being busy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I'm too busy. It's like they're trying to run away from whatever it is that's trying to catch up with them, right? The other thing too is really diving deep into how you respond to situations. And that requires you understanding how you're actually feeling. Now, I always say this, it's easy to pick the low-hanging fruit, mad, glad, sad, happy. But what lies underneath that, right? Usually mad, anger comes from intense hurt, comes from intense trauma. So once you get in tune with how you're spending your time in terms of your life, how are you spending your time with your friends, with your personal time, your free time on your own? Are you spending time on your own? A lot of people don't like to do that. They don't like to sit in their own skin, because then all the little voices start coming in, So the intentional freedom is to understand your journey and understand that you can't change it, but you can change how you carry it. And that's what intentional freedom is I never ever want to give the impression that it's not like I have this constant battery of stuff coming at me about my childhood. I mean, my God, that would just be exhausting, right? But there are times when it creeps up, when something happens and you just automatically blame yourself and, all of those things. So if you want intentional freedom, you really have to understand yourself, and you have to have conversations with yourself.
So say a voice is coming up about your childhood. Maybe you've just spent time with your granddaughter, and then the voice is coming up afterwards. How do you sit with these voices, or do you sit with them?
I do sit with them, yes.
I mean, but why? Well, why sit with them? Why not try to avoid them?
Because if you avoid them, you're going to end up being really angry. What a good question that is. You know, if you don't face what it is when those voices come up, you know, for me, I'll give an example. When I spend time with my daughter, my granddaughter, you know, I'm just so pleased she's got this great life, right? Doesn't mean she's not going to have stuff. If she's a human being, of course she's going to have stuff. But I think what brings it up for me is my little self quite often will come forward and is just sad that she didn't get. I watched them. In fact, yesterday they were at my place, my son and my granddaughter. We went to the playground, and he's so in tune with her. Like they're so in tune with each other. And he, you know, he picks her up and they go on the seesaw and they go on the slide, and she'll be like, "Daddy, I don't want to go by myself." So he gets up there and he slides down with her and stuff. I think that's when my little self kind of comes forward and is like, "Man, I didn't have any of that. It was just kind of sink or swim. There was none of that holding on to my father and hugging him and telling him I loved him. I mean, it just didn't happen." And that's the part that makes me sad. So when that comes up, I just have to remember that, you know, you can't compare your journey with anyone else's. And I truly believe that I have that journey given to me so I could be the one that talks to people about how it's not about letting it go. It's about how you can carry it and still have a very wonderful life.
It's not about letting it go. It's about how you can carry.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to purge all these memories from your mind.
Some I do. Some I purge because there's just no value to having. There's no value to holding on to it. Right. And the thing is one of the things that I do when I talk to people about their grief journey is when you're having a conversation with yourself about another human being that's hurt you or whatever, is it's so simple to vilify. It's so simple to make them the bad guy. So I always tell people, when you have one bad thing to say about someone, then you turn it around and you find a good thing to say, because no one should be an angel and no one should be the devil, right?
No one should be an angel and no one should be a devil. That's so amazing.
Yeah. And so when you find that, and it's not about condoning, and it's not about blaming or being a victim. It's just saying, you know, you're recognizing that this other human being also had their own journey, also was triggered by things. I mean, I can't even imagine as a woman now to be stuck in a marriage you couldn't walk away from. I mean, you didn't walk away from marriages in the 60s. I mean, some women did, some men did for sure, but most didn't. And when you know, when you're in love with someone, I'm sure my father was never always this, you know, falling down sloppy drunk, but you remember the good parts to them. So that's what makes you want to stay. And you've also got the social stigma of being divorced. Not now so much, but back then, divorced, it didn't work. I mean, then she didn't have any money to start over. I mean, she was trapped in a lot of ways. So did I like what she did to me as a mom all the time? Of course not. I didn't like any of it. But on the same token, I can understand that her frustrations, she just probably didn't really like me. We just never bonded, right? I didn't like her. She didn't like me. It was simple as that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, it's
I mean, we in this life we just don't like everybody, and everybody doesn't like us, and
yeah.
How about?
Yeah, and I mean, really, I don't want everyone liking me, and I don't want to like everybody. That must be exhausting.
How about how about when physical sensations come up about grief? Like, is there a way to deal with? I mean, you can think about it and and reframe it and stuff, but what about the physical sensations that can be so overpowering and
Like the
just
anger or the anxiety, that kind of thing, you mean?
yeah, the anxiety, the clenched stomach, or the
Yeah.
tight shoulders, or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's a really good question, and that's one of the things that we talk about in intentional freedom course is what are you doing for your self-care? For me, I run. So if I need to get out of my head, I go for a run. If I need to go get out of my head, I go for a walk. Sometimes, honestly, if it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm just really down about remembering, I'll just go to bed and go to sleep. You know, I just, or I journal. I journal a lot still, right? I mean, I hope I don't make it sound like I'm this mess now, because I don't feel like I'm a mess now. But there are times when I really need to just kind of make sense of it. I'll go and read a book, get out of my head. That's the thing, is getting out of the head. So the physical reaction to that answer is, if you don't deal with that stuff, you're going to get sick. I really believe this.
So when you feel those feelings, you get proactive and you go do something. I mean,
Yeah.
from running to like sometimes you just go to sleep and sleep
Yeah.
those feelings off,
Yeah.
and that's brilliant because sometimes I forget when I'm all up in arms in my body that just sleeping it off and waking up feeling better in the morning is a very simple option.
Yeah, and one of the things that I did learn was, when I was taking Al-Anon, that's the group with the families of alcoholics. One of the things that I did learn was, when you're feeling like you're out of control, is to just give it up to the universe and let it go. And
Mm.
it's gonna make sense. I mean, did that childhood make sense? No. But then I remind myself I didn't have the worst childhood either. And I'll tell you, when I met my birth parents, especially my birth mother, oh my gosh, the best thing that happened was I was given up for adoption. I can't even imagine what my life would have been with her. Yeah. So
Uh,
when you think it's the worst, it actually turned out to be the gift for me, was to be placed in this home. I mean, I grew up in a beautiful part of Canada. I have incredible cousins. I mean, I love my one cousin is like my sister. She call each other sister cousin, you know?
mm.
And like they're a good family, right?
uh, with the last few questions here, I can't believe I didn't ask you this before, but what is the gift of becoming present?
So what I do when I do that work with the gift of being here and now is
Yeah.
finding the gratitude, is knowing your journey and understanding it, and you know the part that sucks, right? But also the being present part is the gift is knowing the work you've gone through. The gift is knowing that you're standing exactly where you want to be. Boy, that's powerful. To be
Mm,
exactly where you want to be in your life is amazing
mm,
feeling, right? So
mm.
that's when that being in the present, and it's like being now, even though it's important to look back to understand your feelings and change them and unpack all that kind of stuff, the real gift is finding how you can have purpose now.
Even though, oh my gosh, even though it's important to understand all the stuff in the past, the real gift is finding how you can be present and have purpose now.
And be
If
in,
I,
yeah,
if
be
I,
in complete control. Even when you're not in control, you're actually in control. If that makes sense, you know, it's like, okay, I'm actually feeling really crappy night. I'm really triggered that I had a crappy childhood and my mom was mean to me and blah, blah, blah. So now I'd go in and I go for a run, or I go, you know, I can go for a kayak. I can go for a walk. I can sit on my couch and eat bonbons and not feel guilty. You know, it's that kind of stuff. That's where the power is that you're here now. You're not being threatened. You don't have to always go into survival mode. It's like right here. I get to be right here. It's beautiful.
you can go to the window and take a picture of a bear.
Exactly. And be grateful that I'm in the house while it's walking around my house.
Yeah, that's gratitude right there.
Yes, it sure is. I'll send you the video after we're done. I'll send it to you because it's like, yikes.
Wow, please. So I love talking about the power of doing our imperfect best. And what that means to me is we have a vision of where we want to go in the next week, the next month in our life, the vision of the best we want. But then imperfections come up, mistakes are made, and what imperfect best means to me is we use all the imperfection to propel us forward, to learn from, to grow. And so I'm wondering what doing your imperfect best means to you.
So I think it's really important what you said is to accept your imperfect self. It's really freeing to let it be. If there's something you don't like about yourself, then change it. If there's something you don't like about your life, then change it. So for me, I think that I always have that vision of that little girl in the background watching me and always questioning, are we doing the right thing? What are we doing here? And it sounds silly to be having a conversation with really an imaginary child, but she's very much alive inside of me. And it's really important for me that I can protect her now. And I will protect her as fiercely as I can. But she is who she is, and that's not going to change. So I quite often will have little conversations. I'll hold her hand and tell her she's okay. She needs to hear that. I don't know if that sounds hokey or not, but that's what I do.
It doesn't sound hokey at all. Trying to connecting with like unifying all parts of your experience. That sounds really powerful. Talk about intentional living.
Yeah, it's right. And and it's not about comparing what other people's journeys was. When you had said earlier, oh, the luck of the draw. I'm almost betting. I mean, I've had one person in my life tell me they had a perfect childhood, and my immediate response was like, huh. So how do you go up from perfect, right? And I think there's a little bit of power too to be sitting and being okay with where you're sitting, right? You don't always have to be the most famous person on the planet. You don't have to be the most wealthy on the planet. You know what I mean? You don't have to have the perfect everything. You need to be really happy with what you have, what you've created. And if you're not, then change it.
Amazing.
I got you thinking, didn't I?
So the best way for people to get a hold of you is thegiftofbeingpresent.com.
Yeah. Thegiftofbeingpresent.com.
If I can spell present here.
PRESENT.
.com. And how do you spell com? No. So the gift last thing, thanks so much for being here. 2020 has been a bugger of the year for a lot of people, and 2021 is looking to have its own complications. What one last thing will you say to people to inspire them to be present in their life and to
for me, 2020 was a good year because I got my second perfect granddaughter in 2020. And I got to buy my dream home in 2020. I think what I would tell people is to, do the work, do that hard work. And I make no bones about it. It's really hard work. It hurts. But at the end of the day, for to look back and see how far you've come emotionally. You've raised your emotional intelligence. You've taken care of your little self. You've taken care of yourself. You are in control. And I think that that's where the power is. So I would, say to anyone, if you're feeling like there's something that's not right in the world or in your world, you can only control how you respond to it. I mean, we see it all the time, Jason. We see it with people's opinions about everything and anything. And you just have to let them stand in their truth, let them do whatever. It really matters for you what you do.
Mm.
And you don't have to explain it to anybody. You don't have to explain your life to anybody.
Mm. Mm.
Right?
Mm. Thanks. I needed to hear that, and I bet the viewers did too. And just thanks for being on this journey on and making the courageous decisions you made and doing the work of healing. And
well, Jason, we were friends instantly when we met at, I think it was Deb's networking event, and that's not going to change. I thank you so much for the work that you do. I mean, you're going along no different than the rest of us, right? Yeah. Thank you for letting me share my story. It meant a lot.
Cool. You're welcome, and have a great day. So appreciate you.
Yeah, you as well. And stay away from the wildlife in South Dakota.
Yeah, don't want any deer licking me. Oh my gosh, so amazing. So honored to hear all Helen had to say, and wasn't that inspiring? And what else is going to be inspiring is I'm going to play the outro now instead of the intro, as I've done the past couple weeks. So thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week. You know what I mean. Bye for now.